Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil, Kapadia here. We've got the full crew together today. A mid-season spectacular. Nora Princiotti, Steven Ruiz, and Diante Lee. Everybody is in the house. We're going to talk some trade deadline, but more importantly, we're going to get to our Midseason Awards, which I don't think we're going to agree on a lot of those. Maybe one or two here and there. But Nora, how are we doing? How's trade deadline day? And among other things happening today, treating you so far?
What a day for cable television. I mean, it really is something. They moved the trade deadline and look what happens.
It's a great day for punditry in general.
It's a great day for punditry, and I feel lucky to be a part of it with you guys.
Yeah, college me would have been doom scrolling for a very long time today if this were happening while I was still in school.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing I've given up since leaving college is doom scrolling. It's the only thing I do. That's like, I mean, I feel like I apply it to all walks of life too. Like I do this career via doom scroll, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely part of it. It is hard to log off, as we know, as probably many of you listening know, on a day like today. All right, we're going to do some trade deadline stuff off the top. NFL keeps trying to make this like a big thing where it's like, no, the trades happen in the weeks leading up to the trade deadline. It's not all at the last second, but we did get some today. And so we're going to focus on kind of the three biggest ones we saw today. Let's start with the Detroit Lions. Probably the favorites in the NFC right now with the way they've been playing. They lose Aiden Hutchinson to that big injury a few weeks ago, and they acquire Za'Darius Smith from the Cleveland Browns for a 5th and a 6th. They also get a 7th back in return. Ruiz, what do you think this move for the Detroit Lions?
I mean, I think it was the obvious move, and I think we all thought they were going to make this move once Aiden Hutchinson went down with that injury in Week 6 in the win over the Cowboys. I hadn't realized how bad the pass rush had gotten since that injury, especially on third down, because you haven't really noticed it because the offense has been just steamrolling over teams. They've created turnovers on defense, so third down defense hadn't been a concern for them over the last 3 weeks, I'd say, but their pressure rate on third down has dropped to 20%. It was 53% before the Aiden Hutchinson injury.
Wow.
They had 5 sacks on third down before the Hutchinson injury. They have 1 since then. So their pressure and sack rates are way down. We haven't seen a team exploit that yet, but you have to imagine in the playoffs, they're going to come across a quarterback who can exploit that issue, and there's going to be different game scripts. So I think this was a move they had to make, and I don't know if Zay Smith is going to be able to provide 80% of what Hutchinson provided that defense, but he might not have to because the rest of the team is just built so solidly. So, I mean, it's a 5th and a 6th they gave to Cleveland. They, I don't think they're going to regret the day they gave up day 3 picks for Zay Smith, even if he's not a player that they expect him to be. So a good move, a low risk move. I don't know how much it moves the needle, but it doesn't need to move the needle much to be a successful trade for them.
Yeah, it at least gives them something. There was no home run there was no swing for the fences to be had here. Max Crosby did not get moved. No one like that got moved. So you're looking for a short-term fix. Veteran pass rusher can obviously line up on the edge, line up on the interior, and it gives them something. Like you said, if I were a GM and my team was contending, take any day 3 pick you want. Go ahead and take it. I'm trying to win right now. So yeah, I like that move for the Lions as well. Next one, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have been looking for a wide receiver for 9 months, 10 months now, whatever it is. They've been involved in every rumor. They acquire Mike Williams from the Jets. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers was heartbroken about this trade for a 5th round pick. Nora, I feel like every time we're doing a podcast together, there's something happening with the Jets. So let's throw this one to you. Steelers, Mike Williams from the Jets. What do you think?
Well, for the Jets, it's just seemed kind of obvious ever since they got Davante Adams. I mean, even before then, since that Week 6 game against the Bills where it ends, Rodgers throwing the interception and then kind of calling Mike Williams out for running the wrong route after the game. I think it's felt like he was going to be either severely minimized in this offense or removed from it entirely. I believe I saw... Oh, gosh, I hope I'm giving the right credit here. I think Jeremy Fowler saying on ESPN earlier today that he had not necessarily requested a trade, but just said, it's fine if you get a good offer. I'm not going to make a fuss about it. So I'm sure that Mike Williams, who had definitely been de-emphasized in that passing game, is probably pretty okay with being shipped out of New York. It just seemed like that was something that was only a matter of time. And then for the Steelers, I like this a lot. I mean, I don't think that they're getting like peak Mike Williams, but I think he's got something. I think it was just a bad fit in New York and he never got on the same page with Rodgers. And then in that Pittsburgh offense, I think he's the type of receiver, it's 6'4", big body, vertical outside X guy who is something they really don't have. George Pickens is a different type of receiver. Calvin Austin, slot guy. Like, there's nobody like that on their roster right now. I still don't know how to feel about the Steelers in general, how to feel about that passing game in general, because every week I look at it and just go like, how is this happening? I don't understand it. But if you think of that sort of basketball team analogy, I think he's a really good fit there because it's something that they don't have.
And if they're just going to like lean into the let's let Russ throw moonballs downfield offense, which I think they should. That should be the whole passing game. They should do it 15 times a game and see what happens. Then Mike Williams is a good quarterback or a good receiver to have for that type of quarterback because Russ is going to give him a chance. He's going to throw the ball up. It's going to be a jump ball. And Mike Williams may not be able to separate at this point in his career, or, he's coming back from injury. So we don't know what he's going to look like going forward, but he can win a jump ball still. And I think Russ is going to give him a chance to win those jump balls more often than not. It kind of feels like they're building like a discount version or like a Temu version of like the 2022 Eagles offense, where we have these two guys that can win on the outside if you cover them one-on-one. And if you don't cover them one-on-one, we're going to run the ball because we have a run scheme that can take advantage of that. I don't think it's going to be quite as effective as it was for Philadelphia, but I think it will be good enough to get this team to the playoffs, which is probably the goal.
I mean, and I think that on a base level for Pittsburgh, they probably needed another playmaker that was a hedge against George Pickens. Like, we are just 1 month removed from Mike Tomlin basically having to go out publicly and say, like, we think we kind of have to minimize this guy's usage and how much we rely on this dude in order to make sure that he's like playing at the level that we need him to. And I think that there was a little bit of effort stuff that was tied into that as well. And obviously, the people who are pulling clips of George Pickens kind of half-ass running through routes at different points in the season have made a big deal of that. And I think that if you do want to have, to Steven's point, that 20-plus air yard on play action passes as often as I think you need to with Russell Wilson as your quarterback, you need another jump ball guy. You can't rely on George Pickens to be the one who's always going to win those high variance possessions, because we've been waiting for years now for him to be that receiver. And it's just entirely possible that that's not the best use of him. He probably needs to be played in spurts a little bit more often than he is right now.
I mean, if there's any coach who knows how to kind of navigate a moody wide receiver, it's probably Mike Tomlin. I mean, dealing with George Pickens probably feels like dealing with Jerry Rice compared to what he was doing, dealing with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. Two guys that are very interested in the results of
George
today.
Pickens seems to be that he's just like a little bit of a punk, maybe. And like,
yeah.
As far as Mike Tomlin,
every couple of weeks he gets disinterested and he doesn't try as hard.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Hey, who among us doesn't check out at work every once in a while?
I was going to say, I was like, shoot, man, I got to look in the mirror with that kind of description. Sometimes every couple of weeks, it's like, not my best call. And that's okay. You push through, you send it in, and you move on to the next one there. Yeah, I'm picturing defensive schemes like, at the end of game when they're like, don't let these guys get to the sideline, keep them in bounds. Teams are just going to do that the entire game to this deal. You really don't need to have a defender in the middle of the field. The ball is going outside the numbers on 90% of Russell Wilson throws. The other ones might be little check downs, but I like it. Lean into what the quarterback's going to do at this point. I don't know where it's going to get you, but it's a 5th round pick. And like you guys were saying, it's not like they had, they were throwing Van Jefferson, all due respect, on the outside there. So this is a more talented receiver with a little more upside. So yeah, I like the move too from the Steelers. And then finally, the Washington Commanders acquire Marshon Lattimore from the New Orleans Saints, who also fired their head coach, I believe, since we last spoke, in Dennis Allen. They get a 3rd, a 4th, and a 6th, and in return for Marshon Lattimore and a 5th. So I thought pretty good return for the New Orleans Saints here. Diante, I don't know which side of this interests you more. The New Orleans Saints finally saying, all right, let's maybe get rid of some of our players and accumulate some draft capital, or the Commanders saying, hey, let's build a weak position because right now we have a chance to make some noise in the NFC.
Well, I think you can look at it from both perspectives. Pardon me. I think from Washington's perspective, they needed to add playmaking talent in the back seven. Like that was an issue for them. They also have to add pass rushing talent. There just weren't as many names available that I think could have stepped in and made an immediate impact for them. So if you can't get an edge rusher, then getting a guy like Marshon Lattimore, especially at a discounted rate, I think for them, when you think about what his ceiling is, even if he hasn't been the same player he was when it seemed like he was going to be a perennial all-pro shutdown corner a few seasons ago. So I like that from that perspective, just getting a high-profile name on the depth chart at corner. They also, I think, need to play more man. I think Mina Kimes from ESPN tweeted this out, right, that Dan Quinn has been playing a lot more kind of soft zone shells. And there's a space and a time for that. But I think for his defense to be at its peak capacity, you need to have a number one corner that allows you to play more single high and more man coverage. So obviously, Marshon Lattimore will go a long way towards accomplishing that. But to your point, Sheil, I care more about this from the other side, looking at the Saints and trying to figure out exactly what the timeline is that they're trying to set themselves up for with this roster pivot. I know our old buddy at the Ringer, Ben Solak, was tweeting about Marshon Lattimore's cap hit earlier this morning. Basically, they're only going to be saving like $500,000, basically. Yeah. In cap, and he's still going to count against their dead cap up to 2026. So I think from the Saints' perspective, the thing that I was trying to figure out is why position yourself to take this long window of rebuilding when it probably would have made more financial sense to renegotiate and extend, get his cap hit down in the coming years, and deal with him at a different point in time. I think now what they've done is they've kind of forced themselves to have to come back to the table with Ryan Ramczyk, with Demario Davis, with a lot of their vets that are going to need to, have their contracts converted into bonuses and take dead cap further into the future in order for them to have something viable in the coming year. So I just don't understand why this was the move when you could have just held on to probably your best defender outside of Demario Davis, figured out his contract situation, and maybe found other ways to tank. But I think that their cap is going to be so tied up in 2025 and 2026 that this might end up being a 3 to 4 year roster pivot just based on some of the money they have tied up at other positions now.
Yeah, it's going to get bleak real fast. And the last person standing might be Derek Carr. It's like Derek Carr is going to be like the Fresh Prince meme where he's like sitting there and no one's
standing in an empty house.
Except for instead of having Will Smith standing there, you have Carlton standing there and Derek Carr.
Yeah, it's going to be I don't even know. Like, honestly, it's a great conversation that we should probably have in depth at a future point. Like, all right, we know none of us agreed with the mess they got themselves into, but say they call you up right now and say, hey, help me get out of this mess. What steps do you take? Because I don't want to say unprecedented, but it is just they don't have much on that roster. They're in bad shape. They've been trying to win 8 or 9 games every year. They just fired their coach. The GM just seems to have like immunity, I guess. He's just going to be there forever. We'll see if Mickey Loomis sticks around in the offseason. Diante, to your question, all I can think of is they thought this is like a decent haul, because as cornerbacks get older, when Darius Slay got traded from the Lions to the Eagles a few years ago, it was kind of a similar haul. I think it was actually less than what they're getting for Lattimore. And then you save some money just in cash. Hey, you don't have to pay him money, which hey, owner, we like this. At least we don't have to pay him this kind of money. But you're right. I mean, they're just in a very strange spot right now where this doesn't give them like great financial relief, where this is the first step really towards getting out of that hole. It's more, hey, accumulate draft capital. Maybe you hit on some of these picks. Now you have players on cheaper contracts. They got a lot of stuff to sort through here. But the Commanders add a player. I like it. Nora, we were talking about, I think on a recent show, like there is something to be said for just trying to go make the playoffs and maybe win a game, even if you don't think you're going to win the Super Bowl. And I think that definitely holds true for an organization like the Commanders, that it's just been like a beaten down fan base. The vibes are good to make a move like this.
Well, not only that, if that's the type of, maybe you're not setting your sights on we're going to win the Super Bowl immediately, but they've had such a good season thus far. Making the playoffs, winning a playoff game, even just one, as you said, would be so meaningful for that organization. And think about some of the opponents who, they might end up matched up with or have to beat in the NFC or even in their own division. If you're facing AJ Brown, if you're facing Devontae Smith, someone who you feel good about lining up against those guys is something they didn't really have. So I think totally agree that the return doesn't have to be like 2 interceptions in the NFC title game and they go to the Super Bowl for something like this to just be really, really meaningful to an organization that's had so little success. But I also think that if you think of the playoffs in mind, like you can really see the value of going and making a move like this. So I'm totally with you. I don't think it has to be like a big long run for everything to feel just good in a way that it hasn't in so long in Washington. But they've just been really good. And I think it's a good move to make. And I do think you can start to have slightly longer term than that conversations with this team.
Yeah, and this isn't like a 1-year rental either. He still has 2 years beyond this year on his deal, and it's not terribly expensive. It's $18 million per, and it's just $2 million each year in roster bonuses. So, they have some leverage if they want to renegotiate that deal and then bring down his cap number next year, or they could just leave it as is and just move on in 2 years if he's not, or even cut him next year if he's not what they thought. But like, that's what I had in my notes. This is a trade about beating the Eagles and having a guy that can stick with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside, because that's what the Eagles are going to want to do. And that's what Lattimore specializes in, guarding vertical routes down the field. We've seen that throughout his career. I don't know if he still has the same juice he had when he was at the top of his game a couple of years ago, but you watch the tape and he's still hanging with those receivers. There's actually a clip from when the Eagles played the Saints. Jalen Hurts throws a deep ball down the sideline to Devontae Smith. It's a bad throw, but Marshon Lattimore is there and makes a good play on the ball.
Yeah, I think to Deontay's point, he allows you to play a certain type of way. He's a veteran. He can be on an island with some of those guys. And to what you guys were saying, he's young enough, under contract, where this isn't a half-season rental. Has had some injury stuff, so that obviously is going to be a concern, but could work out well for the Washington Commanders. All right, those were the big trades today. There were some other minor ones that we're not going to get into here. We will have some winners and losers on theringer.com, so be sure to check those out. We're all contributing to that one, so you can find out what we thought about a bunch of these trades and what the teams did at the trade deadline. We take a break. We come back. We do some awards. Who do we have? Who are our runner-ups after 9 weeks, the midpoint of the season? We'll get into all of that in a moment here. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. We are doing MVP. We are doing coach. We are doing offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, offensive rookie, defensive rookie. And then Ruiz said, let's throw the assistants some love, which, of course, I mean, you can't be a good podcaster in 2024 without having your people as That's offensive and defensive coordinators that you either want to praise or trash on pretty much any piece of content you do. So we're going to do that as well. What order should we do? Do we want to build up to MVP conversation? Do we just want to lead with the big one? Is that better podcasting in case, people don't get all the way to the end? Who has words of wisdom here for us?
I think we start with the big one.
Yeah, start with the big one.
I think we should
start with the big one. Okay, good. We're all on the same page.
We have short attention spans. It's That's 2024.
Right. Yeah, we might forget by the end of it.
Like Steven said, we got doom scrolling to get back to. Let's get the big ones out the way.
There you go. All right, let's start with MVP. Again, for each of these, we each chose who we're actually going with. This is the MVP for the first 9 weeks of the season. And then a runner-up. Nora, start us off. Who do you got?
Wait, I have a question before we start. Is this legal for Nora? I remember there were some questions about you talking about your awards.
She can't bet on it.
Because she votes, right?
Yeah. But this is the halfway point of the season. She's not betting on it. She's just telling us who she prefers.
So it's fine.
I was just trying to create.
The email hasn't gone out yet. We're good here.
Doing it live.
I was trying to create some drama. I know she's going to give us her picks anyway. It would be bad content if she just stood here like AJ Hawk and didn't say anything.
I think this might be kind of anticlimactic because I'm pretty sure we did this 2 weeks ago. But I am sticking with my pick from then. It is Lamar Jackson. It is, to my eye, the quarterback who has just had the most obvious impact elevating his team. All the stats back it up. He's first in EPA per pass play. He's first in dropback success rate. He is pretty likely on his way to a season where he could have 4,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards, which would be really impressive. He's the quarterback of the best offense in the NFL, and he is very clearly the elevator of that offense. We can talk about some runner-up contenders, but to me, this was one of the easy ones.
Does anybody not have Lamar Jackson as their MVP?
Steven, I dare you.
No, why would I not have him? I'm not. No. I'm Team Lamar.
You know
at all
why.
times.
You know why you're being looked at right now.
No, Lamar Jackson's the MVP without a doubt. I don't have Justin Herbert on my ballot, on my 2 column ballot. So
How many
I'm trying to
columns
start that.
does it take to get to Herbert?
All right.
Five.
All right.
Still have him at 5th.
So we all have Lamar Jackson. I honestly don't have a lot more to add. We've talked about Lamar Jackson a lot. You spelled it out well there, Nora. It's just, what more is to say? He's played awesome. He hasn't had bad games. He's throwing it. He's running it. They have the best offense in the NFL. There's no argument that the pieces around him are lifting him up. No. He is lifting everybody else up. He's playing better than he did in either of his first 2 MVP seasons, which is really saying something. So we can move on to the runner-ups, which I think are going to be probably way more interesting. Diante, give us your...
I read your column, Sheil. I know where you're going with this, and I'm ready to fight about it.
Shoot, thanks. This is like when you put your fantasy stuff out there, and then you're in your league and everyone knows who you like. But that's okay. Not everyone who's listening read the column. Hopefully they did, but I don't think that's realistic. All right, Diante, who do you got? Who's your runner-up?
If you listen to the weekly preview pod, I am the guy that likes to take the long plus odds on a weekly basis. This is probably one of those moments where I just don't have to outthink myself, right? We're just going with Josh Allen. To me, it's Josh Allen. We've been talking about it on a week-by-week basis. You take out that blip in the schedule where they played awfully against Houston. Baltimore dominates them the week prior. And you look at the season in a whole. I've talked about him being great in the red zone, great on third downs. He's been as accurate as we've ever seen in his career. And they're just able to lean on him every time they need a play, and he seems to come through, whether it's scrambling or playing from the pocket. To me, I think that you can maybe throw a Patrick Mahomes in there from the sense of playing well, an undefeated team. But if you're talking about pure impact on a down-to-down basis, week-to-week basis, right now, to me, it seems pretty clear that Josh Allen is the number 2 in the league.
Who else has Josh Allen among this group?
Josh Allen has thrown 2 interceptions this year. We spent hours. There were hours of podcasting committed last season about, Josh Allen's throwing too many picks. Josh Allen's throwing too many picks. He's thrown 2.
And he's still playing the same. He's still playing the same chaotic style too. It's not like he changed his ways. Same. Yeah,
but when it was breaking the wrong way last year, we talked it to death, and now it's going the other way, and it's just Josh Allen, pretty good.
That's a man with conviction. He has conviction in the way he plays, and I like that. The luck is breaking his way this year, and we're seeing that not affect his stats in the same way it did last year. But the playmaking is still there. The daring playmaking, the touchdown throw he had on Sunday where he flips it and he's about to get hit and he has to. It's almost an anticipatory throw. He almost threw the guy open with a flick of his wrist.
Crazy.
If we had beaten that out of him, if Sean McDermott had discipline finger wagged that out of him, I would have been so disappointed. But he didn't do that. You see Patrick Mahomes, who I think is the best quarterback ever, basically. He kind of became like a nerd at the quarterback position. He checks it down all the time. He doesn't take these chances as much as he used to. And meanwhile, Josh Allen's just screw it. I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing this. And if they complain about the turnovers, I'll just point to the scoreboard and I'll point to the overall results, which have still been very good.
I have to say, I loved you mentioned Mahomes, so I have to get this take off. In that month, Xavier Worthy, in that early on, does not get his feet in on that beautiful deep ball from Patrick Mahomes. And Troy Aikman couldn't get it out of his head. It's the fourth quarter, other stuff's happening, and he's referencing Troy Aikman's going to be 85 years old, just going up to strangers, being Xavier Worthy, week 9, 2024. What was he doing? How did he not get his feet in there? So yes, I just had to mention that. So Ruiz, you have Josh Allen as your runner-up as well?
Yeah.
And Nora, do you have Josh Allen as your runner-up?
I do.
All right. Well, I'm going with somebody else. We'll spice it up a little bit. We can't be boring on the Ringer NFL show. I'm going with my boy, Jaden Daniels, ahead of Josh Allen. There is such a strong statistical case and eye test take and whatever else you want that Jaden Daniels deserves to be in the number 2 spot. Bills Mafia, don't get mad at me. I've defended you on podcasts and written content for years. I got Josh Allen number 3, but the Commanders' offense statistically is better than the Bills' offense statistically. And I think if you look at their supporting cast, you would say the Bills certainly have a better offensive line than the Washington Commanders. We can talk about how much Cliff Kingsbury does for Daniels versus Joe Brady does for Josh Allen. We can discuss those things. And then supporting cast, I don't think Josh Allen has anyone like Terry McLaurin, but I think if you took the groups as a whole, I don't think there's a huge difference there. So Daniels right now, second behind Lamar Jackson in EPA per pass play. He's run for 459 yards. And then if you look at some of the stuff we usually like to look at on this podcast about, is this quarterback related or scheme related? He is first in EPA per pass play when pressured. He on third and fourth downs in those gotta have it, we know you're going to pass situations. He's second in EPA per pass play to Patrick Mahomes. So I just looked at it, and in my head, I'm like, I'm not saying I would rather have Jaden Daniels over Josh Allen this weekend, the rest of the season, the next 10 years. I'm not saying that, but when I looked at the entire body of work from the first 9 weeks of the season, I felt like Jaden Daniels has a slight edge with how he's performed. All right, who wants to go first and tell me why I'm getting booted off the podcast and won't be allowed to make any more selections for the rest of the show?
First of all, you are saying that. You are saying you'd rather have him than Josh Allen. That's what the MVP award is about. It's who's the most valuable, and you're saying that Jaden Daniels has been more valuable to Washington. Who's been the most valuable through the midpoint?
Who's been the most valuable through the midpoint of the season? That is, what do you mean? That's the award. This isn't a projection.
Well, that's true. So your contention is that if you swap these quarterbacks, that the results would be the same, or what?
I think they would be very similar. Yeah, if you swap these two quarterbacks, like if you put Josh Allen in this Commanders offense, I think it would probably perform at a very similar level. But I'm struggling. Like, what are the specific ways where it would be better? Like, is there meat? Where is the meat left on the bone with this Commanders offense? They're second in the NFL, and they're throwing to Noah Brown and Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler. I mean, I just don't understand how anyone could really operate this offense better than he's operated the offense this year.
Well, I do think that's a good point. I do think his talent has allowed them to field this offense. But I think the offense, there is question marks about the longevity of the offense. And I still have those question marks. You could still see how hard they fight to stay ahead of the chains. And if they fall behind the chains, they do have good EPA numbers on third down and success rate numbers. But when you watch the plays, these aren't like the dropbacks you're seeing with Patrick Mahomes go through on third and long. He's not in a pocket where it's collapsing and nobody's open and they're facing man coverage. And part of that is the constraints he puts on the defense as a runner, because you have to keep him in the pocket. You can't play man coverage. You can't turn your back to the pocket. But you watch and guys are getting schemed open. He's making good throws on top of that, but the bulk of his production is coming off of schemed up plays that other quarterbacks don't necessarily get the opportunity to cash in on. And then the other thing I'll point out is Marcus Mariota looked pretty good in the offense.
I mean, there's not a lot of data to back that up. I'm just saying, if you look at how often he's throwing into a tight window, what his expected completion percentage is, I understand what you're saying. It's a lot of throws to the first read, but I don't know. I don't know how much I'm supposed to. That's a good conversation. That's a good conversation for if we're saying, can this sustain? And I agree with that by the end of the season, my ballot might look differently. But in terms of the types of throws he's making, I think he's making a lot of difficult throws.
But the thing I'm finding hard, the leap I'm finding hard to make is going back to the Josh Allen point, where you're right. There's no evidence to suggest that it would be worse if you put Jaden Daniels in there. But let's use common sense. Jaden Daniels is nowhere near as good as Josh Allen at playing quarterback. That would just be a ridiculous statement to make. So how could that be possible? I think there's something that the evidence and the numbers are missing if they are suggesting that Jaden Daniels has been as good and is as good as Josh Allen.
I mean, I think performance-wise through the first 9 weeks of the season is my argument that I think he's played as well as anyone could play in that offense. I agree with you. If we're zooming out, if you're telling me, do I think that's going to be the case the rest of the season, the next 5 years, whatever? Of course not. Josh Allen has a much bigger, a much greater track record. He's done it in different situations. But if I'm looking at this sample so far, I don't know. Maybe there is something there, but I didn't find it in any of my research. I don't know. This is helping him here, or he doesn't have to do X, Y, and Z, that type of thing.
Marcus Mariota played pretty well, is all I'll say. I know it was against the Panthers.
Give me
the Panthers.
I wish. Please bring me Marcus Mariota for a 3-game sample. I am begging. I don't want Jaden Daniels to get injured. Jaden, maybe just chill, Jaden. Take a couple weeks off just for podcasts, for team content, for me. Take a couple weeks off so that I can throw that nonsense out there. I would say this, though.
I'll say first is he's not as obviously Marcus Mariota is nowhere near as talented as Jaden Daniels is a great quarterback compared to Marcus Mariota, but it does show that the offense is providing some easy buttons to some quarterbacks who have looked horrendous in other stops in the last couple of years. I mean, it's only a one-off example, but
one game sample. One game sample. That's all I'll say. All right. That is my selection. Yeah, it's good. We got to listen. You got to get into some arguments. How boring would that have been if we all would have had the same two guys? All right. That is the MVP debate. Next up, we got Coach of the Year. This one is very interesting. I wrote down when I was writing my column 10 different names. And I'm like, I don't know what direction to go in here. I feel like a third of the league is doing a pretty good job coaching so far this season. All right, Nora started the last one. Ruiz, you start us off on this one. Who do you have for your Coach of the Year?
I'm going with Mike Tomlin, and I am projecting this out a little bit because I expect the Steelers to look even more impressive than they have over the first half of the season. But like when you look into their numbers, this isn't like smoke and mirrors like it's been in the past. Their point differential checks out. I know the offense has been inconsistent, but even when Justin Fields was out there, it was productive, and we've seen it be productive the last couple of years. And I think just the way he's handled the quarterback situation, which would be very dicey in other organizations, like look at what's happening in Indy right now. I don't think Mike Tomlin would have botched the situation as badly as Shane Steichen did. And then the offensive coordinator hire, how he handled the quarterback situation, how the defense continues to just play well at a high level, no matter who's out there year in, year out. And the fact that they don't give away games, they win games, they don't lose games. I think it's time that we give him credit for it. And if he finishes this year like 11-6 or 12-5, it's not like the old Tomlin jokes where he's like, oh, he's going 9-7 or whatever. He might win this division. He's competing with the Ravens. They're neck and neck in the division with maybe the best team in the NFL right now. So there's something to be said about that. And the other picks, like Dan Campbell, I think would be my second pick. He's second on my ballot. The only thing I would say about him is that's more of like a longevity award, or not longevity, but like the last couple of years, I think has been his coaching job. I don't think this year stands out from the rest. And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it.
All right. I also have Mike Tomlin as my top choice. I don't have much to add. You laid it out, Ruiz. I mean, this isn't your old school Steelers are winning by 1 point every week with some nonsense. There is some of that in there for sure, but higher point differential than the Ravens so far with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Again, I will tell Steelers fans over and over again, okay, you can point to me that he hasn't won a playoff game since whatever it is, 2016. Other coaches with these quarterbacks would not be sniffing the playoffs or a winning record. So you got to take that into account every time. Nora or Diante, did either of you have Mike Tomlin, or are we going in a different direction?
Different direction for me, although Tomlin up there, certainly.
Okay. This was probably the closest one to me. Like I kind of have it written out as like 1 and 1A. Mike Tomlin's my one, but like we'll get to the runner up for me, but it could have gone in either direction between my two candidates. And I'm with Steven. Like to me, you have to separate all the playoff success or lack thereof when we're talking about this award. Like there's a time and place to talk about the playoff games that he has and hasn't won, and whether or not he should have been expected to win playoff games, given what the roster and the state of the offense was towards the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career, and obviously through Kenny Pickett's tenure as a starter. But yeah, I think that this is probably the first year to me where you can look and say, like, all right, now that he's flushed some of the bad offense that existed before out of this thing, they've looked good passing the ball, or decent passing the ball, much more functional than what I think anybody's preseason expectations would have been. And this defense continues to perform at a ridiculous level, in spite of the fact that everybody knows what they're going to play, because it's been the same defensive infrastructure for over a decade now, and they continue to execute at a higher level than everybody else in the league. And if they continue to sniff around winning the AFC North, given their quarterback situation, it would be hard for me, even having this race as close as it is, not to give it to Tomlin under those circumstances.
I feel like that is like the most underrated sign of good coaching. Like I know like people like me who cover the sport and get all excited about like schematic evolution and like people doing creative things. Like the fact that they could just line up and play the same defense, and they have been for the last couple of years, and they play it so well, that's proof that they have their fundamentals down. They know how to teach this, and they know how to coach it where the guys aren't messing up, and they're able to get away with playing a more, I don't know. I don't want to say simple because I don't think it's simple what they do, but a more uniform style of play. That's a testament to his coaching and that program that they've built on the defensive side. And now we're seeing it kind of on the offensive side, at least the early stages of it with Arthur Smith.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what we said on the Sunday night show with Mike McCarthy. It's like, yeah, part of coaching, like, can you get the players to execute what you're asking them to do? And they just do that every single week. That's not making the right fourth down decision. That's not, oh my God, the schematic wrinkle that everyone's going, but that is like a bigger chunk of it than any of those things. And they do that very, very well. All right, Nora, who do you got for your winner for Coach of the Year at the midway point?
So this was the hardest one for me to pick, just because I think you could make a case, like you said, there's, close to 10 coaches who I think could all be really deserving. I ultimately went with Kevin O'Connell. Interested to see how this holds up over the course of the entire season. But I just think what's happened with this Vikings team, if we go back to the preseason or last offseason and just everything that was going on there, and then you throw in the injury to the quarterback, I think we would have expected close to nothing from them. And the fact that with Sam Darnold, he has this as a, top half offense, resurrecting the career of a quarterback who had been pretty much, left for dead, considered a bust. And then also defensively, I think Brian Flores deserves the bulk of the credit for what's happening there. But part of being a head coach is filling out your staff. And I think there are very few head coaches in the NFL that would have even hired Flores to begin with, at least not that quickly, and not, giving him the reins to make that unit
they all had a chance. He was a linebackers coach. Literally every other team in the NFL had an opportunity to hire him as a defensive coordinator, and no one did it.
No one did it, other than Kevin O'Connell. So, I think the single most impressive feat of coaching I've watched this year was what Matt LaFleur did with Malik Willis. I think the Dan Campbell argument is really strong. I do think it is a little bit of a cumulative few years type argument. Obviously, you guys made the case for Tomlin, who I think is super deserving. Harbaugh? Jim Harbaugh, I would throw into the mix there. Dan Quinn, I think you can throw into the mix. This was, to me, in a year where I feel like, we watch these games every Sunday, and more than the other way around, I'm finding myself going, geez, it feels like we're watching a lot of sloppy football and not great execution. It was sort of interesting to flip that on its head and be like, okay, the coaches who are doing it, like, there are some pretty good resumes for, this group of 8 to 10 here. So I went with O'Connell. I sort of tabbed Harbaugh as my runner-up just because I thought that it was sort of cheeky and different. But I really think that a lot of these guys are deserving candidates. I know that's a boring take, but I just want to call out some good coaching.
I feel like O'Connell kind of gets hurt by the fact that Darnold was the 3rd overall pick. And it's so easy to forget that he's just been a bad quarterback throughout his career. And on the Sunday night,
really, I don't find that easy to forget.
Yeah, I feel like some people have. You listen to the broadcast
in the press box at MetLife for the Seeing Ghosts game. I do not.
Yeah, he was pretty bad in that game. But you hear the commentators talk about him whenever the Vikings are on national TV, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you could see the talent coming out. He just needed to be in the right place." And it's like, no, he was a bad quarterback, and he would have been bad anywhere. And Kevin O'Connell was working around his issues. Even on Sunday night when he's given the ball away and kept the Colts in that game. The Vikings, there's been a couple of times where that's been the case. You could argue he almost gave away the 49ers game. You can argue he almost gave away the Jets game in London. But O'Connell and his coaching staff have been able to work around those issues. And I think that's the testament to good coaching, more so than the fact that he doesn't have, Sam Darnold doesn't look like the Jet Sam Darnold right now.
I
think he's the only 7-year vet who still gets talked about. Yeah, I was going to say, I think he's the only 7-year vet that still gets talked about like he's on the 2nd year of his rookie deal when he's on TV. People still talk about him like he's fresh out of USC and that we didn't have the entire Jets tenure to go off of in terms of collecting data on whether or not he's any good. And I think Nora laid it out. Like the fact that they're even league average right now as an offense with Sam Darnold, given what we've seen of him as a pro, speaks volumes. What they've gotten out of Aaron Jones, especially like in the first month and a half of the year before the injuries kind of seemed to derail a little bit of this running game, and still being able to find Justin Jefferson as often as they did to start the year when Jordan Addison was out and your second best receiver was Jalen Naylor, right? So he's just done so much scheme-wise. And I think that the spirit of this award is which coach has gotten the most out of their team relative to preseason expectations. Kevin O'Connell's high on that list for me.
Yeah, I've got him as my runner-up. I think just to hammer home the Darnold point, from the moment he entered the league until like the start of this season, if you look at the sample of guys who had thrown as many passes as he has, he was either the worst or like the second worst quarterback in the NFL. So it might, we look at him now and he's making mistakes. And trust me, I've been, we've been talking a lot about that on this pod. To get him to like the 18th best quarterback is a massive accomplishment, which I think that's what you're talking about, Ruiz, because on the broadcast, they're like, this guy had the talent. Shanahan wanted him last week, and he had those 4 games in Carolina. He has never been able to put together a half a season where they're 9th in passing DVOA. That's crazy. With Sam Darnold, that's like the biggest accomplishment of any coach in the NFL this season. So I had O'Connell as my runner-up. The other thing I love is you never watch a game and go, why isn't Justin Jefferson more involved? Oh, the defense is taking Justin Jefferson away. Nope, they've got answers for that every single week. Every defense comes into a game against them. Don't let Justin Jefferson kill us. And you look up in the third quarter and he's got 120 yards. So that's obviously a lot has to do with Justin Jefferson, but also like I like that the coaching is like, no, we're not going to allow that to happen.
It's like every time you see another player make a big catch on a key down, if they like zoom out and show you the all 22 replay, you could see like the defense selling out to stop Jefferson elsewhere, and the play was designed perfectly to exploit that. Like, yeah, he's done a tremendous job designing that offense around one star wide receiver and a good offensive line.
No doubt. All right, so I had O'Connell as my runner-up. Ruiz, did we get your runner-up? Is it O'Connell or you got someone else?
I'm going with Dan Campbell, but like you could go with 10 candidates for that.
Yeah. And Diante, you're good too, right? You said,
Kevin O'Connell's my runner-up.
A lot of guys who, all right, I'm just going to read my list so that the what about for the what about crowd. All right. Dan Quinn, Nora mentioned, Dan Campbell, Ruiz mentioned, LaFleur we mentioned. We got O'Connell and Tomlin. How about a Sean McDermott? I don't know. I threw him out there. It was supposed to be a reset year. That is a top 10 defense, and there's not a lot of talent with that group. Nora mentioned Harbaugh. How about Sean McVay? They've had a bunch of injuries, and they are right in the mix, and they can still design an offense with basically giving Matthew Stafford and any other 10 people. If you have those two, you can have a solid offense. So I gave him some
Jonathan
love.
Gannon? Jonathan Gannon, anybody?
I don't have Johnny Gans.
The cringe god? Cringe his way to the other side?
Okay, you're giving Johnny Gans a shout out there. I like that. I did give Raheem Morris a shout out. That thing could have gone sideways very quickly with the Penix draft pick, and they're in first place and the offense works. And then probably my most controversial, Sean Payton. I mean, listen, I know he's arrogant. I know he's smug. Their over-under for wins was 5.5, and they've got 5 wins so far. Does anyone want to yell at me?
That's a Vance Joseph award. Come on now.
All right. There you go. All right. So those are the coaches we think are doing a good job so far this season. All right, we take a break. We get to Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, the rookies, and an assistant. All right. We are back on the Ringer NFL show. Offensive Player of the Year, Diante, you lead us off. Who do you got?
I think that this one might actually be more unanimous than MVP. To me, it's Derrick Henry. Like it's ridiculous the kind of production that he's getting out of this year, playing with a good quarterback for the first time in his career, playing in an offense that's trying to distribute touches as much as they are, and a quarterback that is also a running threat in his own right. For him to already be over the 1,000-yard mark, possibly going to put up the most productive season in his career. And I think really stamping his Hall of Fame case this late into his playing days. Outside of Saquon Barkley, and I know we'll get to runner-ups at a different point. Saquon Barkley, maybe Justin Jefferson. I just don't know who else could possibly steal votes from him for Offensive Player of the Year to this point in the season.
He's not even in the top 2 on my ballot.
Wow. Give it to us. I like it.
Lamar Jackson is my Offensive Player of the Year. I'm tired of separating these two awards. He plays offense, and he's the player of the year. Like, that's what the award is for. And he also does it in two different ways, because you could argue can also be a running back and double as a running back, and he's also the best quarterback in the league. I think this is the perfect way to celebrate him mastering not only the throwing aspects of the position, but also the run game aspects of playing the quarterback position. And my second pick is Saquon Barkley, and only because Derrick Henry has never hurdled a guy backwards. And he's also not the best player on his own offense. I'm sorry, I'm not giving offensive player of the year to a guy that's the second best player on his offense.
So I don't want to associate myself with the first part of Steven's take, but I want to make the Saquon argument on that basis. He has fairly comparable stats to Henry. Look, if Derrick Henry has 2,000 yards, he's going to win this award. But if Saquon finishes with comparable stats to Henry on an offense that, instead of having one of the league's best passing offenses and one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the game, is the driver of that offense, I do think that is in some ways more impressive. And also, he hurdled a guy backwards.
Yeah, he does. He does have the signature play. I was flip-flopping on those two when I was writing my column. Henry and Saquon Barkley was my runner-up. It's kind of convenient because they have the exact same number of touches so far this season. So it's very easy to do the comparison. Barkley's averaging more yards from scrimmage per game. Henry's been a little bit more efficient. Barkley has more 10-plus yard runs. Henry has more 20-plus yard runs. Henry has a better quarterback. Barkley has a better offensive line. It's like impossible. Honestly, you are splitting hairs. You could easily go with either one of those two, but those are my two. I've got Henry 1. I've got Barkley 2. I'm a grown up. I'm a rule follower.
I swear I'm not saying this for the sake of my argument. I think AJ Brown's the best player on that team. He's just been less available for Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But I'm not mad at the argument that, like, Saquon Barkley is the most integral piece right now. I think everybody who watches the Eagles would say that he's the most integral piece, and the reason why they've been winning games over the last month.
Now, how do we feel?
That's fair.
I'm a rule follower, so I thought the rule for this is pretty easy. Pick the best non-quarterback. Deontay, how do we feel about Ruiz? Is this a hipster take? Is he going
not a rule,
against?
Is it? There's been double winners.
It's not an unwritten rule because
unwritten rule.
It's unwritten for a reason because it's a bad rule.
Yeah. I'm not in favor of
MVP voting. You need to campaign to fix MVP voting. Don't punish Offensive Player of the Year candidates because we've screwed up MVP and just made it the best quarterback award.
But Lamar Jackson transcends the quarterback position in a way that no other player in the league right now transcends it. I think he deserves to get a double award for this season that he's having. I've never seen anything like it. It's quite possibly the best season a football player has ever had. He's outpacing the stats he had when he won the Heisman at Louisville. He is treating NFL defenses the same way he treated Duke defenses and Syracuse defenses. This is insane what we're watching. Give him all the awards. Make him coach of the year.
I mean, it is funny that, like, the NFL awards, they really are structured to kind of, like, sprinkle a little glory over here and a little bit over here and a little bit over here. Like, you have all these years at the Grammys where it's just like, okay, we're giving every award to Billie Eilish this year.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was thinking. It's like, could you do a sweep like you do at the Grammys? Like, can you win an EGOT in NFL awards?
No, I don't. Yeah, I would be more okay with it if the MVP was a different quarterback and you're like, this number 2 quarterback has to get rewarded, then I'm good with it. You make a compelling point. You are right that we have not, like, the numbers he's on pace for, we have literally never seen a quarterback do before. And the fact that it's a dual threat type deal, it's like offensive player, he's doing all the things you need to do on offense, he's doing. So I understand that. And then, of course, let's make sure Justin Jefferson gets his flowers because, I mean, the guy is just incredible and easily has a case.
Has he hurdled the guy backwards though?
Yeah, I know.
I'm not in. Like, what could Derrick Henry possibly do to match that? By the way, you'd have to, like, stiff arm 2 guys at once,
and they'd have to, like, go, like, into the first row of the stands.
Yeah, we could bring Josh Norman out of retirement to be that guy.
All right, there you go. I love it.
Actually, didn't Earl Thomas catch the worst Derrick Henry stiff arm as a Raven?
Well, we can't. I don't think we could bring him out of retirement to be that guy. It seems like he's disappeared.
Yeah, he might be a little harder to find based on recent events. All right, let's move on. Before we go any further, let's go to the Defensive Player of the Year. I thought this was maybe the most difficult. I didn't know who to pick for this one. Nora, let's go back to you to lead us off. Who did you land on for Defensive Player of the Year?
Well, so I want to point out that, as referenced, we are recording this podcast on Tuesday, November 5th. And obviously, this is not something that I expect to hold throughout the entire season. But I feel that it should be acknowledged that even though he's not going to play again this year, like, Aiden Hutchinson was the best defensive player through the first half of the year. And so if this is the Midseason Awards pod, I feel that he should be acknowledged as deserving. I think he's still like third or fourth in pressures because when he got hurt, he had 7.5 sacks in 5 games, but he had 45 pressures. And it took Nick Bosa, who's the first player to leapfrog him, took Nick Bosa 3 weeks to get past him. He still leads the league.
It's been a very busy time for Nick Bosa, okay? It's been a very stressful time for Nick Bosa. Very important time.
He still leads the league in pressure per snap. That obviously does not depend on counting, and he could very well end up finishing the season ahead there if you don't control for the number of snaps, obviously. And I just think, like, listen to our conversations about the Lions, right? Like, listen to our conversation about the trade. We think of that defense meaningfully differently overall, and then particularly in high leverage third down situations against the better offenses that they're going to have to play in the playoffs. He's a difference maker for them. He was a difference maker for them. They're in a different situation without him. He's obviously not going to win this award because he will finish the season having only played 5 games, but he was the most impactful defensive player for the first half of the season, and therefore I am acknowledging him as such on this pod.
All right. Nora's got Aiden Hutchinson. Ruiz, who do you got?
I actually I'm compelled by that argument. I
forgot to even think about that.
Yeah, I didn't even.
She's making a good point.
Only
forgot
Nora
it was just
sees
for the first half.
Aiden Hutchinson. But
well, I'm also trying. This is how I sneakily don't reveal my ballot.
Well, that's a good point. But like, I did like a table comparing Zay Smith's pressure numbers and sack numbers to Aiden Hutchinson. And even though he's played double the games nearly, he's played 9 games to 5 games. Compared to Hutchinson, and Hutchinson's still like outpacing him in all the counting stats there are, and it's not even really close. And if you look at the pressure rates and you look at the average time to sack and all that stuff, and you look through the splits on like early downs and actual pass rush situations, Hutchinson is the best one in the league so far through the first half. But I didn't think about that. I was short-sighted. I just went with Fred Warner, who when I watch him play, I don't know the numbers behind this, and it's kind of hard to get numbers on a linebacker and really capture linebacker play with that. But whenever you watch him play, he's the best player on the field. Like, he almost single-handedly won them that game against the Vikings. And he's made plays like that in other games. Like, I remember the forced fumble against the Jets in week 1, and there are other plays and other examples and plays against the Cowboys. He's the focal point of that defense, and he's the reason why that defense hasn't fallen off more than it has as they've lost talent on the defensive line.
Yeah, to me, I think that, like, this spiritually for me, the Defensive Player of the Year award is just the MVP of that side of the ball. And when I just think about like down to down impact right now, it's Fred Warner. So that's my pick as well. And like, I could put together a reel on a week by week basis of how his ability to identify what an offense is doing adds value for all of his teammates, whether it's fitting the run because he sees what motion is coming or what formation they're in, or adding value as a blitzer, even if he's not getting a pressure, setting up picks and stunts for a Nick Bosa or for somebody else to get a one-on-one. And then there's obviously all the coverage stuff, which is a little bit more tangible because you get to see his ball production a little bit more in that way. And there are still so many underlying influences that he has on the way a play goes because he can deny the middle of the field in a way that some of the best safeties in the league don't right now. So that's my pick. That's my pick to win. I think we'll get to some of my hipster picks and when we start talking about runner-ups. But what Nora said, I think really did move me as well because I really was kind of tortured by like picking a guy that I know is that's not finishing the year and is not going to have the requisite sample size by season's end to be in consideration. But I don't know, even for all the production that he had, if we were really properly appreciating the season that Aiden Hutchinson was having. I mean, this was going to be one of the best pass rush production years that we had seen maybe ever based on what he was on pace to do. So I do want to make sure that I give a little bit of love to how he was playing up until the leg injury.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I had Warner as well, just modern NFL offenses. They're just picking on the linebackers constantly. They're working the middle of the field. There's play action, there's RPOs, there's motion, there's all kinds of things that are hard to deal with. And I just felt like the difference between Warner and every other linebacker in the NFL right now, like that's a bigger gap than any other position, I think, in the NFL. So I went with him as well as my choice.
To me, it feels like what it felt like talking about Earl Thomas in his prime. It's been an Earl Thomas heavy episode, but like how he kind of stood out from the rest of the safeties and everybody wanted a player like him at that position because it allows you to play a certain style of defense, but there's only one Fred Warner and he's the only one that's able to play like this. Like he can guard two routes on one play. And I don't think I've ever seen a linebacker be able to do that.
Yeah, he's been amazing. All right, Diante, you piqued my interest by saying, you're going to get to the hipster pick. So you give us who is your runner up? Who are the other guys that you were considering?
I don't know if people have really paid enough attention to the fact that the guy who's second in the NFL in sacks is 340 pounds and plays nose. But Dexter Lawrence has 7.5 sacks and he has 340 pounds. And I think he has 7 TFLs as well this year. I don't because the Giants aren't winning, obviously he's not going to be in contention for the award. But that is a guy that if you love football, you have to get NFL Pro so you can watch from the end zone angle to see this mass of human being take on double and triple teams and not get moved an inch, if not resetting the line of scrimmage 2 to 3 yards behind where the ball is snapped. I mean, he is a marvel physically in a league full of guys who are huge and athletic. And I think that when you talk about just individual influences on a defense, that is not a good defense up the spine. And he does so much to cover up their problems by just eating up space and being a playmaker in his own right. So that's my runner up. And the other guy I had in consideration was Will Anderson, who's another guy I think that people have to watch specifically as a run defender to get a proper appreciation for how much havoc he causes for offenses on a week by week basis.
I feel like at the end of the season, I need an all Diante defensive team because I'm Will Anderson. I know that's a Diante guy. You got Dexter Lawrence. You got Fred Warner on there. I know there are some other guys.
Just wait till we get to Defensive Rookie of the Year.
There you go. He'll have some more there. Ruiz, who did you have as your runner-up?
I have Kyle Hamilton, but I could go in several different directions. I thought about Patrick Surtain. I thought about TJ Watt is always an option, but Kyle Hamilton, just the way he plays the position and the way he just blows up bubble screens is just so fun to watch, and it's so consistent. I know he had the unfortunate interception drop against Cleveland, which ultimately led to their loss, but he just makes so many plays that I can easily forget about that one low light from the season. And he has so many highlights and he can do so many different things and do them all at a high level. I think he's the best. If I'm building a defense, I'd probably take him over Fred Warner right now, just because of what he can do in coverage, and he can play man coverage against receivers. I don't know if he's had as good a season as Warner, but I think he's as good of a player as him. So I'm going to pick him with my second.
Yeah, deserves a shout out. And Nora, who do you have as your runner-up to Aiden Hutchinson?
Yeah, I scribbled down a bunch of names, including Dexter Lawrence, so I'm glad that Diante brought that up. But I think TJ Watt definitely deserves a mention. Steven, I think, was talking about just how that defense functions a little bit earlier related to Tomlin. And Watt's a good example of that because he's just doing the same thing all the time. He's just lining up in one spot on the left side. Everyone knows where he's going to be. And then he just still is impacting plays on a very regular basis. He's got 6.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, also drawing, I think, the most double teams in the league. He's chipped all the time. He is just the focal point of game plans against that defense. And it still doesn't matter. He is just executing on a regular basis. So I think he's turning into one of the sort of easy to forget because it's kind of like clockwork players, but he's really impactful for that defense. So I had him as my runner-up.
And the other guy who fits everything you just said, Myles Garrett. I'm not going to get bored with Myles Garrett. I mean, you get ready to face that defense, and that's the guy you have to stop. And he leads the most quick pressures in the NFL, according to NFL Pro, is top 3 in pressures. The sacks aren't there, but man, he gets double teamed at a high rate as well. And then Diante, I thought your hipster choice, because I know you've talked about this guy before. I thought you might give Trey Hendrickson some love because his production is crazy for
leading the league in sacks right now.
Yeah, and they don't have it. It's like that defensive line. I mean, that's a one-man operation, that pass rush. They don't really have anybody else there, and he leads the NFL in sacks right now. He's top 3 in pressures. He's second in quick pressure, so he's another guy who probably deserves a shout-out here. All right, now we move on to the rookies. I'm going to lead this one off because listen, I already went on a whole rant about him. Offensive Rookie of the Year. I've got Jaden Daniels, just to put it in kind of historical perspective. Since 2000, 64 rookie quarterbacks through the first 9 weeks of the season. The only 2 who have been better EPA per pass play were 2016 Dak and 2004 Ben Roethlisberger, and it is very, very tight there. It's like 100th of a decimal point there. So I already went on my long Jaden Daniels rant already. Does anybody have anyone other than Jaden Daniels? No.
Nope.
No. Yeah. All right. Just hoping for a little social clip that would get the Washington fans a little bit upset, but no one's got that. All right, Ruiz, who do you have as your runner-up? Because runner-up was actually pretty difficult, I thought.
I went with Brock Bowers just because I think he's the best player at his position compared to the other guys. Like, I think I don't want to like downplay what Caleb Williams has done. I think when you watch that film, you watched the film last week against Arizona, he's as impressive of a rookie quarterback as I've ever seen. I just don't think he has the production to win this award or to justify.
As you've ever seen Caleb Williams this season so far?
I just mean like his skill set and how he operates in the pocket.
The highs.
I don't think, and not necessarily even the highs, the lows. I think like the way he operates that off. I've never seen a quarterback take command of an offense before the snap like I've seen him do. I've never seen a quarterback work through their progression. He works through his progressions. I don't know why everyone claims that he's just like a backyard player who wants to get outside the pocket. It does happen, but usually it happens for a reason. Nobody's open downfield and he's given them a chance. But no, Brock Bowers, just like the way he plays football, it's translated. What he did at Georgia has translated. I think that was the concern that everybody had, that he wouldn't be this playmaker who's capable of taking over games. But we've seen him take over, like we saw him take over the Ravens game. He could take over games in this league. And I think when you get to year 2 and year 3, he's going to be able to do it even more. I think he's going to be more confident. But this year, he already looks like one of the best tight ends in the NFL.
He's 10th in the league in yards after the catch already. Top 10 in the league in yards after the catch as a rookie tight end, and does not have a viable receiver playing beside him to attract any other attention. What he's doing right now, like Steven said, it's exactly what it looked like against SEC opponents. You know, like the game for him that I think really stamped him as a prospect was him basically single-handedly beating Florida last year. Before entering the draft. And you just see so often he gets on these hot streaks where it's like you give him the ball within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage or give it to him a couple yards short of the sticks and he turns up the field. And next thing you know, he's got 8, 10, 12 extra yards after the catch because of just how athletic and dynamic he is. He is going to be a matchup problem in this league for a long, long time. And I think he's a pretty clear runner-up option. I also wanted to give a nod to Brian Thomas Jr., who's been one of the best receivers in the NFL, one of the most explosive receivers in the NFL right now, averaging 17 yards per catch and almost 600 receiving yards right now, as, again, another wide receiver who does not have a lot of other high-profile talent around him with all the receiver injuries that Jacksonville's been dealing with this year.
No doubt. Nora, did we miss anybody, or one of those your runner-up, or did you have someone else?
I had Bowers as well. I mean, I think you can toss Malik Neighbors into the conversation. Other rookie receiver has been really impressive. But Bowers, to me, is just a little bit more superlative at the position. I think Stephen did a good job outlining that. So I went with him as my runner-up.
I feel like Neighbors is like the most exciting player at his position. Like he's obviously playing in an offense that is not conducive to stacking passing numbers. And he's playing with a quarterback that's not going to necessarily get the most out of him. But when you turn on the film and like the juice he has, it's undeniable.
Yeah, hopefully we're not like...
I think if he played in an offense where the coach's sort of core aim on a week-to-week basis were not to prevent the quarterback from throwing passes, we might be having a slightly different conversation. Yeah. But I do think that is going to get in the way of his potential for an accolade like this.
Yeah, I think if he could find a quarterback who throws for more than goes better than 4 for 6 for 0 yards and a half, he's going to get more I know they were running the ball. Calm down, Giants fans. I know they were moving the ball, but still, yes. I just hope we're not talking about this in 3 years. Like, oh man, if we could just get Malik Neighbors a quarterback, because I agree with you. He is exciting, and you can just see it. Get a quarterback, a passing offense that works, and he can be legitimately among the best wide receivers in the NFL. All right, defensive rookie of the year, Nora, lead us off. Who do you got?
Jared Verse, come on down. I'm so curious because I think Diante has kind of telegraphed that he has maybe a little bit of a hipster pick here. This is one that to me felt relatively simple. He's got 32 pressures. He's been really good both against the run and as a pass rusher for the Rams so far. He's 9th in total pressures, and actually only Aiden Hutchinson, who's still holding on because it's a per snap stat, has a better per snap pressure rate still so far this season. And I just think the fact that the Rams were going into the season, Aaron Donald retired, it just felt like that absence was going to be something that we were going to see in a way that was so much more dramatic than I think it has looked. And I think Verse has a ton to do with it. So to me, this was one that was fairly simple.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where you don't have to actually look at the numbers to realize he's impacting the game too. Like if you watch any Rams game you watch, he pops up and he flashes, and then he has the numbers. He's the only good
Rams defensive player right now.
Yeah. So I feel like you almost have to give it to him. He is the betting favorite and the overwhelming betting favorite. The player that I have second on my ballot is Quinton Mitchell, just because I like what that Eagles secondary has done, and I think he's been a good player, and I think a rookie cornerback should be graded on a curve, and I don't think his play necessarily I don't think he needs to be graded on a curve to come out looking good. But considering that, I think you can even bump him up a few spots in his performance.
Yeah, I had Verse as well as it's just not supposed to happen that a pass rusher comes into the league and gives you top 10 production right away, and he's been able to do that for that Rams team. And I got Mitchell as my backup too, as my runner-up as well. I mean, Vic Fangio, they're playing man coverage at a top 5, top 7 rate. So this isn't what are you talking about? They're playing, split safety and he's getting help over the top. No, he has had some unbelievable reps against very good wide receivers, and he's so close to being he could be this pick if he would have caught a few interceptions. He gets his hands on the football every week. He hasn't been able to hang on to him. So the box score counting with him hasn't been there, but I would say he's already maybe a top 15 cornerback in the NFL. He is
how
impressive.
often does it happen where teams will draft a defensive player to attack one certain weakness? The Eagles took him and they're we're going to play more man coverage. The Rams took Verse and Fisk to shore up that defensive line. And all of those draft picks have worked out, including these two that we have at the top of our ballot.
It's usually foolish. I'm usually the guy yelling on all the offseason pods. Just because they drafted this guy doesn't mean they fixed their problem, because that's usually what happens. The guy, it's hard to be a rookie in the NFL. Sometimes the guy doesn't play. Sometimes he plays but isn't good. Sometimes he plays and is average, so you're not really upgrading. But yeah, these two are kind of the exceptions there. All right, Diante, did we name your hipster? Are you digging deep? I mean, I thought we are building up to the most climactic moment of the podcast. Who do you got?
I mean, this is where I'm putting in my vote with the explicit understanding that I'm being the asshole here, because I'm taking a guy who does not have very much tangible production. But my runner-up is T'Vondre Sweat. And this is one of those, gotta watch the film, see when he's on the field and the influence that he has on that defense. When T'Vondre Sweat is playing for the Titans, they're 4th in the league in EPA allowed per rush. They're 1st in run stuff rate. Well, and they are just in general. And then they're 4th in defensive success rate against the run. And a lot of that is because he does the dirty work that allows Jeffrey Simmons to be a game wrecker when he's playing at his best. He makes the game so much cleaner for their linebackers. And now, that's even more important after they traded away Ernest Jones earlier in the season. I love just watching this guy take on double teams and reset the line of scrimmage. I think, like I said, whether he's playing nose or he's playing 3 technique, I think that he does a lot of the dirty work that makes what makes that defense go. That Baltimore defense does rely on guys up the spine being space eaters and playmakers. And I think that he kind of is emblematic of what you want that defense to look like at its best in terms of one player making an influence on the rest of the front seven. So I would say that he's my runner-up, knowing the fact that he's only got 2 TFLs and has not registered a quarterback hit, and I think has less than 10 pressures all year. So I'm not saying that I expect him to get much love from this perspective, but if you're a ball watcher and a ball knower, you can point at T'Vondre Sweat and see what he's doing to add value to his defense.
Diante, how's the interior of your defensive line doing right now? Because you seem to be really, it's like you're longing for a Dexter Lawrence or Sweat in the middle of your defense.
I might be signaling some of my own stresses with my picks here.
He sees him like eat a double team. He's like, oh man, that's I wish I had
nice. Must be nice.
Oh man, if I had a PBR right now, I would just shotgun it on the YouTube. I mean, the hipsters, T'Vondre Sweat, I love it. Digging deep. You built it up and you came through in a big spot. Listen, I'll just be honest. I have not watched a snap of Titans defensive film this year. And
I don't think anybody will blame you.
Yeah, I'm glad. Now I know what T'Vondre Sweat is doing because I had no idea. All right, the last one. The assistant coaches, also a fun one. Honestly, we could have done a whole show on the assistant coaches. It is an award now, as Ruiz has pointed out. Ruiz, you start us off because this was your idea to add this, and I think it was a good one. Who is your assistant coach through the first half of the season?
I mean, I got to go with my man. I got to go with Cliff Kingsbury, the one that's fueling the Jaden Daniels hype train.
Unbelievable. Imagine if you told your August self that you're going to be giving Cliff Kingsbury an award at the midway point of the season because you think he's the best assistant coach in the NFL.
I would be, I don't know how I'd feel. I'm open-minded. I could change my mind. I mean, all of those numbers you just read out about Jaden Daniels apply to him. And guess what? The run game is pretty damn good too. And this team isn't exposing its quarterback to obvious passing situations as much as the other offensive coordinators for rookie quarterbacks. He's using no huddle to great effect. He's using personnel. He's changing up his personnel. He's answered all of his critics about his pass game and how that works on late downs. I think he's like checking off a lot of the boxes and a lot of the questions that people had about him when he was the head coach of Arizona. I mean, maybe he is just destined to be an offensive coordinator. We've seen plenty of guys like that. And most of his issues in Arizona didn't have to do with play calling or necessarily offensive design. It was how he managed games and, how he approached fourth down and stuff like that. So, no, I think Cliff deserves his flowers.
All right. Is it more likely, this is for the group, that Cliff Kingsbury went to Thailand and figured out how to improve his deficiencies and became a better coach? Or is it more likely that the quarterback is making the coordinator maybe look a little bit better than he is? Anybody?
I mean, you never know. Right. Could have been spending a lot of time over
my
there
answer to that
on
is,
the whiteboard, scheming it up.
He got 40 points out of Marcus Mariota. That's on its own. That's enough to win the award.
I need to find some way to erase it. We need to have some moratorium. I don't want to hear about that game again on the Ringer NFL. I need to find some way to extract that from your brain where we have to have like a fine jar or something to a charity where anytime that game game is going to haunt me.
I'll be talking about that game in 2 years. Next election, I'll still be talking about it.
All right. Cliff Kingsbury was not on my ballot, but I appreciate it. It's you brought it all full circle. I'm team content. That was good for team content. We started out with the Jaden Daniels talk, and now we end it with Cliff Kingsbury. All right, Nora, who do you have? Who's your assistant coach?
Oh my God. I feel like such a normie. Deontay's doing his PBR thing. Steven's saying Cliff Kingsbury. And I have Ben Johnson because they score 32 points a game. And
offensive line merchant.
I'm waiting for the day when Steven calls someone like a wins merchant, like points scored merchant.
Oh, that's
Super
coming.
Bowl wins merchant.
Bill Belichick, the ultimate wins merchant. Wins are for losers.
The Lions offense is really good. It seems to get better every year that this guy is involved in coaching it. It has, and I think you could make an argument over whether I'm taking credit that's due to Jared Goff away from Jared Goff, but like he has leveled up some of the areas in which he hasn't been the greatest quarterback. This season, he's playing better football than I think we've seen him, and for some reason, I credit Ben Johnson with that, and maybe I should credit Jared Goff with that. But I just, they've been one of the most impressive offenses, and I think he has a lot to do with that. The other name that was sort of floating around in the back of my head is I think Vic Fangio kind of coaches the Eagles. And I don't know what direction that cuts in if we're talking about being assistant coach of the year, because I don't know. Maybe our Eagles cohort can chime in on that. But it does seem like that unit is sort of figuring itself out, maybe starting to come together and figure out what it wants to be. And then also just like the more that I hear about how things are sort of organized down there, the more I'm like, okay, so Vic Fangio coaches this team, right?
I don't think Vic Fangio. I think Vic Fangio wants to coach the defense and doesn't want to hear about anything else happening in that building.
I mean, that's fair.
Vic Fangio's living the defensive coordinator's dream. Yeah, he's living the defensive coordinator's dream because he just gets to coach the defense and go home. And every time something goes wrong, he can complain about it because all he's got to do is coach the defense, and the defense is playing well right now. Yeah. So he gets to walk in the meeting room like, I don't know what you're doing over there, Kellen. What's up with those fourth down decisions, Nick? I don't have those problems on my side of the ball.
I guess that's what I'm responding to, is that there's a power share on the other side of the ball, and then Vic Fangio just gets to like own his unit.
Yeah, they're all the way. They're 10th in defensive DVOA. Their defense is higher than their offense in DVOA. Look at the talent on both sides of the ball for the Eagles, and they were 32nd last year. It's also good if I would just kind of follow Matt Patricia and like take the job after him. Like, I don't know if anyone's like in media, like what Patricia's hosting that underdog thing. Like if he gets out, go follow that up. I think that's a good sort of life lesson that Vic Fangio taught us.
What do you think's the harder act to follow? Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator, or Matt Patricia, podcast host?
I don't know. I haven't followed his hosting abilities closely.
No, Matty P's got the juice, man. You got to listen.
Yeah.
No, I haven't heard either.
Yeah. All right. Deante, who do you got?
So this one probably is a little bit off the beaten path too. I swear this is not intentionally me being a takester. I'm going with Liam Cohen though for his work with Tampa Bay's offense.
On my top 5 list. Yeah.
Like, and I do think there's a part of this where I'm kind of faced with thinking about whether or not Baker Mayfield is just like a better than decent quarterback, because I do think that he plays okay. He's had a couple of disaster games this year for sure in terms of taking sacks, putting the ball in harm's way. Obviously the Denver game was probably the worst manifestation of that earlier this year. But when you look at what he's done to build this run game up, which has just been like one of the league's worst over the last 3 to 4 years, this is the first time they've had a positive EPA per rush since 2021. I think their success rate is significantly higher than it's ever been in years, or not that it's ever been, but in years prior under different offensive coordinators who run similar schemes and similar systems while Baker Mayfield and when Tom Brady was there. So I think that he's done a really good job at helping this offensive line that's been bringing in new pieces, get up to speed, find some continuity, and try to find some explosives in the running game. And then obviously in the passing game, I think that he's done a great job of just taking stress off of Baker Mayfield's shoulders. There's a lot to be said about like, hey, you throw a bubble screen to Chris Godwin and he turns it into a 60-yard gain. Like that's not a quarterback thing. It's probably most of the credit is deserved for the wide receiver who gets yards after the catch. But I do think that it speaks to his understanding of the playmakers that he has, getting Chris Godwin back in the slot before he got hurt, really pushing the ball vertically with Mike Evans again before he got hurt. And I think using the play action game to keep things simple and very straightforward for his quarterback in terms of having answer shield. I know we talk about this on the podcast all the time, is what coach and what scheme is creating answers for a quarterback that's limited in a lot of ways. Liam Cohen is doing one of, I think, the 5 best jobs at that in the NFL.
Yeah, I think Liam Cohen is doing the job Ruiz thinks Cliff Kingsbury's doing. How about that, to bring it full circle? Mayfield doesn't. I mean, he's throwing 4-yard, 5-yard, 6-yard passes. Nothing's into a tight window. He's got great wide receivers, and they're 6th in offensive DVOA. Ruiz, you are a Liam Cohen guy. You were hopping a book. I think we first had him on Fraud Watch, but then we came back pretty soon and we're like, no, I think he's doing a good job.
Oh no, I never had him on Fraud Watch. Okay. Just because he gave me an interview like a year ago, so I'm not going to put him on Fraud Watch.
Transparency, I like
disregard for yeah. That's one way. That's one thing to call it, being transparent. But no, I agree. He's made Baker Mayfield's job a lot easier while also highlighting Baker Mayfield's strength and allowing him to flourish as a quarterback. And they lost the two receivers and they've scored 26 points and 24 points. And one of those was against the Chiefs defense, which might be one of the best in the league. So Cohen's third on my list. I have Vance Joseph in second, but I think you can go in so many different directions. Like Jesse Minter deserves a shout after taking over what had been the softest defense in the NFL. They've overcome the fact that they wear powder blue jerseys, as Nora likes to point out, and they're playing a tougher brand of football this year.
It's really interesting that I feel like most of the young coordinators who have been impressive are on the defensive side. Whereas Liam Cohen to me is the exception, where I feel like when we get into the hiring cycle, there's just not going to be that many of these, 37 to 47-year-old offensive coordinators that an owner can fall in love with and say this is the guy who's going to, be with me for 15 years and we're going to win Super Bowls. And those candidates just, I'm not sure are going to exist. Yeah. Beyond a couple of names this year.
Cliff Kingsbury.
I have a feeling that's probably good news for Liam Cohen.
Good news for Belichick. Good news for Vrabel. Yeah, I agree with you. I was thinking about that recently.
It's good news for two groups of people. It's the few who still fall into the traditional, right? The types of coaches who owners have wanted to hire recently. And then it's good news for I have really been on this island of I'm just not sure that Belichick is going to get hired. And I still feel the conditions that make me feel that way are in place. The one thing that's starting to make me waffle is I'm just starting to feel simply who else? Who? Yeah. It's just the names are not plentiful.
Yeah, no, I think that'll be a big topic of conversation in the weeks ahead. Now, I feel like you guys were probably the normie's going to pick the obvious choice, so we don't need to say it. So I'll take the normie flag. And I mean, Brian Flores wins the award for me right now. I don't care that they had a couple of weeks where it didn't look as good. They're first in defensive DVOA. Look at the talent on that side of the ball and how many wins would they had? How would we be talking about Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell if that defense wasn't just wrecking the likes of, who was it, the Niners, C.J. Stroud, who there was another good offense in there when they were going on that run. So he gets the award for me. I do think if I actually had to vote, I think I would have Ben Johnson number 2. I had Liam Cohen on there. And let's also not forget about the other vet, Spags. Spags, they lose L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason, and they have a top 5 defense now. Still. And again, that Chiefs team, how would we be talking about them? Their defense has been winning them some games, maybe not this week against the Bucs, but certainly in the first part of the season. So those are the assistants. Did we miss anyone? Does anyone have any closing comments?
I do want to say, for throwing Spags in there, I do think that Todd Monken deserves some credit. He's 1,000% not going to get any because he has the most dynamic quarterback in the league and maybe the best running back in the NFL right now. Yeah. But last year, the story was, this guy, they finally got an adults in the room to call offense. And now that they have a grown-up offense, things are taking off for this team. It's significantly better this year in the run game and in the passing game. And I think that now it's time to maybe give Lamar his flowers, which I'm not mad at. I just think that we can't forget that Todd Monken has iterated on what was already a good thing from last year and made it even better. And obviously the additions help, but you get to see this drop back game, I think, really kind of blossom into what I think Monken always wanted it to be. And now that he has a better rhythm with his quarterback, I think we're starting to see that manifest itself on a weekly basis.
It's probably a good thing for the Ravens, honestly, because if this was a young, a hotshot coach who was looking to make the next leap in his career, then you'd be they got to redo this. I don't know. Maybe that'll happen for Monken, but there is a scenario where that offense is just awesome year in and year out, and they just get to keep him. That's kind of rare now in the NFL to just be able to keep the offensive coordinator who you really like, who's really good. So maybe it'll work out for the Baltimore Ravens in that respect. All right. That was a lot of fun. Thank you to Diante Lee. Thank you to Nora Princiotti. Thank you to Stephen Ruiz, Troy Farkas producing for us. Additional production supervision by Connor Nevins and Arjuna Ramgopal. Appreciate everyone listening. We'll be back later this week on the Ringer NFL Show.